friends, welcome to this program on an overview of open and distance education. All my colleagues, faculties from different University of Guyana and the government functionaries. This is the first video in the series of this course. We will give a brief outline on open and distance education, its organization and management, and particularly I will raise some of the issues and concerns that you should take into consideration while designing, developing, and therefore delivering distance learning programs. So friends, as you see on your screen, we have different delivery models. I have tried to capture all the delivery models in one platform. On-campus learning, the way it is going on, it is more contiguous because the teacher and the students are present face-to-face in the classroom, and therefore the transaction loss is very low, and the teachers can directly involve at the same place, same time. And this is contiguous because they are just there. Otherwise, it could also be synchronous, as it is going on right now, for instance, maybe, and it is the same time. It may not be same place because you may be scattered at different places. So distance learning is the same teaching learning process. All the pedagogies that we apply in face-to-face context are also applicable in distance learning. The only difference is that teaching and learning take place at a distance, and individual learners study on their own, especially through self-learning materials, print, audio, video, graphics, animation, data, all put together at one place called an interactive multimedia, or it could be independent, and but it takes place at a distance. We will examine in detail the various understanding and meaning of distance education. Online learning, which is an offshoot of e-learning. E-learning is basically use of any technology, audio, video, radio, television, multimedia, or semantic web, or the website or online platforms, learning management system, all put together could be called as e-learning. So when we directly deal with provision or teaching learning on the website or a learning management system, we would call it an online learning. So online learning is basically net-based or web-based, and e-learning could be any kind of media application in teaching and learning at a distance. These days, people have been talking about blended learning, more so in the American context, when they say that the face-to-face would have some component of online learning, and online learning will also have some component of face-to-face. They would call it blended. We would try to extend this blending for your consideration to diversified ways of blending a little later in one of the PowerPoints. Mobile learning, as they would call it, an ubiquitous learning, in the sense that there are universities which are using mobile technologies, or the mobile handset and the mobile platform for teaching learning. So much so they're offering the entire diploma or degree through mobile learning. Though these days people have been raising questions about the quality and authenticity of teaching and learning, and therefore mobile learning or ubiquitous learning vis-a-vis a 3D platform, an immersive platform, have been joining together in the context of blended learning. So today, if your exclusive classroom or exclusive distance or exclusive online or exclusive mobile is not going to work anymore, there has been a combination, and which is working very well, which is called blended learning. So as you see on your screen, there are different generations of distance education. We started with correspondence education, moved to mass media, radio and television, and then to telelearning, teleconferencing, audio conferencing, video conferencing with the help of either computer or with the help of satellite, and finally to computer-mediated communication, and finally to intelligent flexible learning. That would simply mean that the university website or university provision is so much programmed in such a way that most of the questions that the students would raise, they will be responded to by the website itself without the help of any human beings. And today, if you extend that, it will, with artificial intelligence or learning analytics and machine learning, all these have come up. And this intelligent flexible learning, which is basically an Australian concept which has come up today, it has become more powerful with this artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, and all technological developments put together. So friends, that you see on your screen is how 1980s the correspondence education first generation got developed, that led to the second generation of open universities. So today we have dual mode universities which are teaching face to face as well as teaching at a distance. There are open universities exclusively which are teaching at a distance, and the open universities could be open and teaching at a distance, like my open university, the Indira Gandhi National Open University or the British Open University. They would call it UK Open University. There are open universities or distance teaching universities which are teaching at a distance but not that open. Say for instance, the Fern Universität in Germany in Hagen, which is teaching at a distance but which has restrictions insofar as quality is concerned. This second generation led to a third generation with the simple development or with the simple understanding that human interaction is very vital in teaching and learning. We cannot do everything at a distance. We need to be face to face, and therefore face to face learning support center got developed where tutoring, counseling, interaction and so on and so forth would take place. That's a third generation which is basically stressing on learner support. Finally, we led to a fourth generation with the development of telecommunications. So friends, just to sum it here for understanding that in technological developments, we have three basic developments. One is broadcasting, second telecommunications, and third computing. All the three are now combined together in a handset called your mobile. Your mobile includes broadcasting, telecommunications, as well as computing. So the fourth generation is a convergence of these three technologies, especially development of telecommunications or telematics, as they would say. That led to the first generation of online learning, which is both synchronous as well as asynchronous. Synchronous, that we are at the same point of time, like in a teleconferencing, for instance, or a telephone. We are at the same point of time, but at different places. Asynchronous, we are at different places, also different points of time. So for instance, as a teacher who is sending an email to the students, and students will be going through, reflecting on and responding, they would take time. That becomes asynchronous. Synchronous as well as asynchronous. So synchronous, asynchronous, face-to-face and online, all put together today would be called as blended learning. And blended learning is taking varieties of different forms today. We will not discuss much about blended learning. There might be some other programs on this, but then we will certainly touch upon that what a blended learning would be. And my presentation would basically include distance learning, online learning, as well as blended learning. So friends, the blending that you see on your screen is three types, or three variables could be blended together. So in your design of a program of study, a certificate, diploma or degree program, you need to consider how best that you can allocate credits to self-paced learning, maybe through self-learning materials that the students would independently study by themselves with mentoring support by the tutor or the counselor, face-to-face learning for clarification of doubts and some hands-on in face-to-face, and interaction could take place with an online collaborative learning if we can create a parallel website for discussion forum or for interaction, or even for that matter, you could use a Google Groups, for instance, for interaction. All the three put together could, for me, would significantly be understood as a comprehensive blended learning program. One thing I must make you very clear, friends, is that the technology should not guide your teaching and learning. Your pedagogy should guide your teaching and learning, and you should bring in technology wherever it is desirable, it is possible, it is doable, it is practical, and it is less costly, because cost is very important for all of us. So as you see, blending could be not only face-to-face and online put together, or credit hours distributed across face-to-face classroom and some credit hours for online teaching and learning or interaction for that matter. But there could be blending in learning outcomes, blending in design of the content, resources, print, audio, video, graphics, animation, data, or even online web resources like social technologies and social networks like your Facebook or YouTube or any kind of WhatsApp or anything that you would like to join in, depending on the accessibility that the professors and the students have. It could also be learning activities which could be blended, assessment, especially portfolios, and of course the delivery strategies where blending could take place. Little bit about distance education theory, friends. Professor Holmborg talked about his Nomo, very recently expired, the Swedish distance educator. He talked about learning as an independent study, that every individual learns for oneself. You learn for yourself, I learn for myself, and therefore a facilitation is needed to internalize that learning through what he called a guided didactic conversation based on your self-learning materials, maybe your counseling, and so on and so forth. Professor Charles Weathermeyer from United States, he talked about independence of learners and individual responsibility of learning, and therefore the professor should provide mentoring support to facilitate or empower individuals to study more effectively. Professor Otto Peters from Fern University, Germany, he talked about that in mass distance education we are following an industrialized or business model whereby there is division of labor and there is specialization, there is quality assurance, there's marketing, and so on and so forth. Professor David Seward from the British Open University talked about now in distance learning, even if we are teaching at a distance, we are human beings, and therefore we need some kind of a support, emotional support, motivational support, personal support, and of course academic support. Professor Michael Moore, a British who finally settled in the US, established the American Center for Distance Education at the Penn State University. He talked about a transactional distance, that physical distance is not that important. What is important is educational and psychological distance, and therefore if we can breeze that, there will be hardly any distance in distance learning. We will look at this in the next PowerPoint. Professor Randy Garrison from Canada and Professor Terry Anderson from Canada also, they talked about two very important things which are basically related to teaching and learning, and more particularly learning. Professor Garrison talked about critical inquiry in online learning, and Professor Terry Anderson talked about interaction in online learning, student-student interaction, student-content interaction, and student and teacher interaction. If you Google all these people, you will find their papers to study in more detail. Professor Michael Moore, who is regarded the most probably the best theorist of distance education, talked about transactional distance, that physical distance is not important, but if we can take care of the transactional distance of teaching and learning between teachers and students, certainly we will overcome physical distance and quality of learning will take place. He explains this in terms of three variables: structure, dialogue, and learner autonomy. He says that if our teaching learning, if we can reduce structure, if we can make it less structured and more flexible, certainly that will give more autonomy to the students. And if we can increase dialogue in the printed self-learning materials, yes, we can make it conversational, we can make it dialogic, and also dialogue in counseling sessions, dialogue through audio and video, dialogue through conferencing. All these reduction in structure, more flexibility, more dialogue will enhance learner autonomy and therefore reduce physical distance and increase and also reduce physical distance, so also reduce educational and psychological distance. So physical distance will be reduced. That physical distance, even if one is 1,000 miles away, that there will be reduction in educational and psychological distance, and therefore teaching and learning will be more effective. This is what Professor Garrison and Professor Anderson talked about, community of inquiry in online learning. You Google them and you will find detail. All these are available free on the website, on the net. So they talked about three kinds of teacher presence, or three kinds of presence in online learning: social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. Cognitive presence in terms of cognitive structure or the mental framework or modeling of the students and teachers. Social presence in terms of gender, culture, language, motivation, worldview. The students bring all these to their study, and of course teaching presence. What is important here is that they said that if we can increase social presence and cognitive presence and teaching presence, the learning will be more meaningful and there will be deeper learning. Students will go beyond surface learning and strategic learning to deeper learning. In my Fulbright in US in 2003, when I was a Fulbright scholar in US, I did a study for my Fulbright postdoctoral on the congruence between the online and offline. Whenever you are online, you are also sitting offline, and whenever you are offline, you might be using your mobile and connecting online. So therefore, your offline identity and online identity, what is the congruence between the two? My submission was that if you can increase or reduce the difference between online and offline identity, or increase the congruence between the online and offline identity, the quality of learning will increase. This is a formulation, and this is published in a book in 2003 from London. Online teaching and learning, as you see, that if you are establishing a system afresh, or if you have already a system in place, you need to consider, starting with policies, different human resources they will be required. We will discuss a little bit about these. Certainly the infrastructure. Then of course a network of headquarters, the main university campus, then its own networks of study centers, or maybe online networks, people sitting at home, but there might be a center, somewhere a network that people must be maintaining that, or the machines which are taken care of, say for instance in terms of machine learning, that the machines will take care of these days, whole lot of activities. These networking you need to decide. The study centers, of course one has to consider. Monitoring, program evaluation and research must be built into your teaching and learning. And quality assurance, because there are quality indicators for all the types of activities that we do, and the national assessment which takes place for the institutions, including distance learning, would take care of that. Blended learning and convergence, that is the main issue today, that we will be designing and developing our programs in a blended way. I will show you some PowerPoints in these. Online learning, the learning management system. These days, the proprietary software like WebCity or the Blackboard are very expensive, and therefore why not using like us, or like I was in University of South Pacific as a director of flexible learning, we were using, and in IGNO also we are using Moodle platform, and the Moodle is cost-free, but you need to customize Moodle to your different discipline requirements, and Moodle can do as much as or whatever you can do within the classroom in a face-to-face context. And finally, your print, audio, video, tutorials, hands-on, and all these, especially hands-on. Because hands-on, you need some face-to-face laboratory, face-to-face computing system, face-to-face hands-on or field study, and so on and so forth. All these, friends, need to be designed and considered by you. Moreover, we need to consider openness and flexibility, that if there can be a flexible entry and exit, that the students can choose whenever they would like to study, if there is a self-pacing, and if you can allow students to accumulate their credits and proceed in their own pathways without very structured pathways that you would like to decide, as it happens in the face-to-face classroom. There should be curriculum information, and there should be some kind of a flexible learner support, because every individual student has a different need in terms of support, and therefore the flexibility can be built into that. In terms of teaching learning, if you can bring in multi-channel rather than just the teacher or just the textbook, just the self-learning material, it should be modular and credit-based. Self-learning, credit accumulation, and all these are possible. So friends, in distance learning, we are considering design, development, delivery, evaluation, maintenance, and revision. A few words about each one of them. As you see on your screen, you will study more once you look at this video again and again, for instance, or you can stop and go through and then proceed, is that what are the factors which are contributing to your designing of a program? Not necessarily because you get the syllabus from different universities and start designing your syllabus. That's not a good way. That you have to consider the different variables that will contribute to design of your program, including the need for 21st century skills and competencies, the need for building employability, the need for bringing in interdisciplinarity into your study. These are very essential today. These are contributing to your teaching learning, and so also the needs and analysis of the learners, as well as your national and regional development and globalization. All these are contributing to our designing of programs, which is leading to a concept mapping or a blueprint or program blueprint of your program, which finally defines, based on the concept mapping, which is giving you the learning outcomes. I would submit here, friends, that once you do a mapping of your program, derive your learning outcomes of your programs, courses, modules, and units, and for each learning outcome, if you can design activities and say how assessment would take place. If you can do this in a blueprint, your teaching learning resources, including technology, would automatically follow. So therefore, I will reverse that. Instead of bringing in different syllabus and designing a curriculum and developing resources, this could be a better way. Once the learning outcomes are decided, you decide your learning activities, the learning resources, including print, audio, video, graphics, online, and website, and YouTube, or whatever open education resources that you would like to bring in. Decide your teaching learning strategies, that how you would like to deliver, disseminate, interact, engage students, put them into tasks and activities, and conduct assessment, both formative as well as summative assessment. Finally, you deliver the program. Once your design, your development is ready, do a program evaluation, maybe after 5 years or after 10 years or every year maybe, and then a program revision. What are the major issues? I will devote next 5 minutes discussing you the major issues. I have jotted down some of the very important issues based on my experience. Design for deeper and quality learning. How could this be possible? Independence and interaction. How much independence you will give to the students and how much interaction you will allow. Because the more independence you give, it becomes less costly for you. The more interaction you design, it becomes more costly because you have to spend money. Resources. What kind of resources would you like to bring in? MOOCs which are free, open education resources which are free. What is about their cultural adaptation, language, and so on and so forth. Activities which need to be indigenous, culturally based, because teaching learning is more cultural. What about plagiarism, for instance? This is an issue. How to integration of learning outcomes, activities, and assessment strategies. Your resources, your teaching learning strategies would be built around these once you decide. What about learner support, program evaluation, and distance teacher competencies? So what you see is the framework of an adult learning, that how students learn, that when a teacher is teaching or somebody is studying a textbook or they are discussing in the counseling center, one is observing, the student is questioning, and student is making meaning whatever the teacher is teaching or one is studying in the self-learning material. So if one is questioning and doesn't make a meaning, one is having a surface learning because one simply wants to pass out, that's all. If one proceeds further, makes meaning out of what one is studying, and then validate that one is becoming a strategic learner. And if one goes beyond to appropriate that and creates one's own meaning beyond what the teacher says or what the textbook or the self-learning materials or resources say, one is creating more meaning out of that. That is leading to what is called a deeper learning. And deeper learning is more creative and innovative. Say, for instance, Bill Gates was hopefully a school dropout, but because of deeper learning, he could create a new system of computing as we see in Microsoft today. So deeper learning is what is required. Because when we talk about mass education in terms of distance learning and deeper learning, they sometimes seem to be contradictory to each other, but we need to design such that we will try as much as possible to achieve deeper learning. So friends, the other issue is how much you can provide for independent study, self-learning, open education resources, kind of learner support. And the other hand, you need to provide interaction in terms of group work, practical, learner content interaction, learner interaction, and so on and so forth. You need to have a balance between independent study and interaction. You cannot leave everything to independent study for a full degree, or you cannot have, which is a pure correspondence education, the traditional, or you cannot leave everything to interaction, which is called a classroom teaching and learning. We need to make a balance between these two. So friends, the MOOC is also, varieties of MOOCs are there, which are available through edX, Coursera, Khan Academy, and many others who are freely making available MOOCs, unless you want a credit transfer to a particular certificate, diploma, degree for which you would like to pay. Otherwise, it is free. So it's massive, open, online, and these are certainly courses. So I will distinguish between XMOOC and CMOOC. CMOOC is a connectivist MOOC. When Professor George Seaman developed the theory of connectivism, and the other colleague, Professor Stephen Down, has talked about openness, they talked about a more collaborative, engaging, activity-based MOOCs. But in mass education today, what is happening, whether it is edX, Coursera, or any other MOOC platform you are talking about, they're more about XMOOCs because they are to deliver to as many people as possible, so they are becoming more instructivist, or a little bit, if you would like to say, behaviorist. So the interaction, collaboration, engagement is reduced or compromised. My submission would be, we should try our best to proceed towards CMOOCs or connectivist MOOCs as much as possible. Open education resources would allow us, because there is an international clearinghouse called Creative Commons, CC. C is copyright, and CC is Creative Commons, which is copyright free. But there are different ways to use open education resources. You can retain, you can reuse, you can revise, you can remix with your programs, and you can also redistribute. So if we are using OER, open education resources, we could also proceed towards more qualitative pedagogy called open pedagogy or open educational practices, that from all the activities that we do in distance teaching and learning, if we can make it more open and flexible, we are moving towards open educational practices. But there is an institutional, national, regulatory, and even cost limitations to what extent we can become open. We need to decide from an institutional point of view. Plagiarism is a serious issue, and even self-plagiarism is also a serious issue. Because if you reproduce your own work elsewhere, that becomes also a plagiarism. We have to be very careful. So the resources that we are using as open education resources are the resources that we will be developing, or you will be developing as self-learning materials in print, audio, video. We must be very careful about copyright and plagiarism. Friends, I was talking about this integration before you develop learning resources or self-learning materials and decide about technology and teaching learning strategies. That for your program, modules, courses, or whatever, if you decide your learning outcome, decide the activities that will achieve those learning outcomes where the students will be engaged, and how to formative and summative assessment that you would like to carry forward to achieve those learning outcomes. Second learning outcome, it proceeds. Third learning outcome, it proceeds in similar way. This is what is called an integration. This integration is very vital, and for this integration we need to keep evidence to show that the students have been able to achieve those learning objectives, especially through engaging in activities. This is most important. Based on these, you will be developing self-learning. This integration is very important because these learning outcomes of courses, modules, designing activities for students to engage with, and how formative, summative assessment would take place for different learning outcomes. So friends, I would submit that this integration is very important to keep evidence, because learning outcomes must lead to some kind of engagement in activities and that assessment, these needs to be put up by you as a design. Then your self-learning materials, print, audio, video, or open education resources would be developed to be built around these, and your teaching learning strategies and technology will be coming in. It's not the other way around. You develop your self-learning materials and then develop activities, then assessment. It doesn't work that way. That's not a qualitative way of doing things. This is one example of my Open University model of learner support. We had the headquarter, the regional center, and study centers, and students. But after 1996 or so, we changed that some of the activities from the headquarter we directly deal with students. Some of the activities we take the help of technology to directly deal with students, and there are some activities that we take care of the regional support service, the regional centers and study centers or learning centers to deal with students. That this decision needs to be made, and this decision will cost money as well as time. So friends, in distance teaching learning, these variables are very important. That once we develop and deliver a program, we need to monitor and maintain that for a period of time, for a few years. After that, we need to conduct a program evaluation. Minor revision takes place every year. Then we conduct a program evaluation, all the aspects of design, development, including costing, which might tell us whether we would undertake a major revision of the program, and finally make an institutional decision. This, in my Open University, we conduct in every 5 years, but there are universities which conduct every year. There are universities which even delay this process. But this is very important to inform us, and technology is facilitating in doing that. So friends, as you see that for a distance in a classroom, it's the teacher and the students. But in distance education, as you see, a whole lot of people are involved in doing distance teaching and learning, and therefore it is a team teaching or it's a collaborative exercise. But the faculty, as faculty, we can do so many roles that is listed here or that are listed here. We can become counselors, we are evaluators, we can design multimedia, we can write the script, we are faculty, we can do a little bit of administration, we can share the responsibility of technical and professional staff, we can do that. But still, different kinds of people with different competencies are needed for distance teaching and learning. But when you go exclusively online, it is the one professor who has to be a designer, technologist, supporter, facilitator, advisor, co-learner, researcher, instructor, mentor, and also become a manager in the learning management system. Of course, the professor may not have the full competency to do a learning management or to act as an administrator in online learning, for which you need a technical person to do that. Other than that, all the activities the online professor can do. So finally, friends, as you see, that today the role of a tutor or a distance teacher is changing. Professional roles, pedagogic roles, social roles, evaluation roles, administrator, technological roles, and finally as a counselor. I think I have completed my presentation. With this brief intervention, I have tried to explain as much as possible that what is distance learning, what kind of design, development, delivery mechanisms that we need to appreciate and understand and undertake depending on the kinds of discipline or the program that we are designing, whether it's a technical profession or liberal arts program or management or computing science or a field-based program and so on and so forth. These considerations would facilitate us conceptualize better, I hope, how a distance learning program should be designed. Thank you very much, friends.